As dawn broke over the gray beaches of Normandy in June 1944, or when biting winds swept through the dense forests of the Ardennes months later. The outcome of the deadliest conflict in human history was not decided solely by strategists in secluded map rooms, nor entirely by thousands of tanks or skies darkened by bombers. At the most fundamental level, where life and death were separated by mere inches, the fate of the European theater rested in the hands of the ordinary infantrymen. These were the men who marched hundreds of miles on foot, slept in waterlogged foxholes, and faced enemy fire directly. To survive and conquer, they relied on tools of steel and wood, forged by the immense industrial might of the United States. These were weapons that became symbols of liberation, from the sharp crack of the world's first standard-issue semi-automatic rifle to the overwhelming firepower of submachine guns in urban close-quarters combat. In this documentary series, we will delve deep into the analysis of the 5 most iconic personal weapons that American infantrymen used to breach the Atlantic Wall and strike at the heart of Nazi Germany. We will not merely look at dry technical specifications, but examine them through the lens of history, tactics, and the eyes of the soldiers who staked their lives on the reliability of these machines. The first weapon, and undoubtedly the most critical, was the very soul of the American infantry in World War II, the M1 Garand rifle. Before the advent of the M1, global military doctrine was still dominated by World War I thinking, where a soldier's rate of fire was limited by the manual bolt-action operation required after every shot. Although nations like Mexico or France had experimented with semi-automatic rifles such as the Mondragon or RSC 1917, no army had dared to equip such a complex weapon to its entire soldiery. The United States, with a vision of mobile warfare and superior firepower, changed this game forever. Designed by engineering genius John C. Garand at the Springfield Armory, the M1 Garand was officially adopted in 1936, making the U.S. Army the first force in history to mass issue a semi-automatic rifle to its entire infantry corps. While their primary adversary, the German Wehrmacht, still relied heavily on the Kar-98K with its slow bolt-action mechanism, every American soldier with an M1 in hand possessed individual firepower effectively double or triple that of his enemy. This difference was not just a theoretical number. It completely altered the dynamics of small unit skirmishes. An American squad could maintain continuous suppressive fire, pinning the enemy down to allow assault elements to maneuver, a feat that other armies required light machine guns to achieve. Technically, the M1 Garand was a masterpiece of balance between power and reliability. Chambered in the potent .30-06 Springfield cartridge, it was capable of effectively neutralizing targets at ranges of up to 500 yards. Its Timon gas-operated self-loading mechanism allowed the rifleman to fire 8 consecutive rounds without taking his eyes off the target or breaking his firing stance, creating a massive tactical advantage in fleeting combat situations. However, the most famous and perhaps most controversial feature of this rifle was its en-bloc clip-loading system. When the final round left the barrel, the empty clip would automatically eject with a distinctive metallic ping. Many myths have circulated claiming that German soldiers would listen for this ping to know when an American was out of ammunition and then charge. However, the reality of the battlefield was far more chaotic than these stories suggest. Amidst the roar of artillery, the rattle of machine guns, and the screaming confusion of combat, hearing a small metallic sound was nearly impossible. Furthermore, seasoned veterans often threw empty clips against rocks to create a fake sound, baiting German soldiers into exposing themselves, only to eliminate them with a fresh clip already loaded. The durability of the M1 Garand was also legendary. The European theater was no place for fragile equipment. From the salt-sprayed sands of Normandy, through the muddy fields of Holland during Operation Market Garden, to the bone-chilling sub-zero temperatures of the Ardennes forest during the Battle of the Bulge, the M1 functioned relentlessly. An officer from the 1st Infantry Division, A unit that had tasted the fiercest battles from North Africa to Germany once remarked that this rifle was like a piano in the hands of an artist. As long as the soldier controlled his breathing, it would never let him down, even if the mud was knee-deep. That reliability forged an ironclad confidence in the American soldier. They knew that, even if outnumbered in men or tanks, the rifle in their hands was the finest infantry weapon in the world at that time. Nevertheless, the M1 was not without its flaws. Weighing approximately 9.5 pounds when loaded, it was quite heavy for soldiers of smaller stature, and the inability to top off the clip before it was empty sometimes caused awkwardness during short lulls in fighting. But viewed as a whole, these limitations were trivial compared to the firepower it delivered. General George S. Patton, one of the most renowned commanders of the Allied forces, did not hesitate to call the M1 Garand the greatest battle implement ever devised. That praise was not empty flattery. It was forged in the blood and fire of millions of American soldiers who carried this rifle halfway across the globe to liberate Europe. Over 5.4 million units were produced, becoming the backbone of the U.S. Army and a symbol of American defense industrial power. Looking back at black and white archival footage, the image of the American G.I. with an M1 helmet and a Garand rifle has become an immortal icon of World War II, representing the generational shift from static trench warfare to the era of automatic firepower and high mobility. And speaking of mobility and close-range firepower, we cannot overlook another legend, a trench sweeper that found a new home in the ruined cities of Europe, the Thompson submachine gun, affectionately known as the Tommy gun. If the M1 Garand was the right arm of the infantryman on open fields, the Thompson submachine gun was the uncrowned king of narrow alleys, ruined street corners, and dark rooms across Europe. Before setting foot on the beaches of Normandy, the image of the Thompson, also notoriously known as the Chicago Typewriter, was often associated with gangsters during the Prohibition era in America in the 1920s. However, when the U.S. military officially entered the war, this weapon shed its criminal past to don the olive drab of patriotism, becoming one of the most iconic weapons of the Allied forces. Developed by Colonel John T. Thompson at the end of World War I, with the initial concept of a trench broom to clear German trenches, the gun embodied the philosophy of overwhelming firepower at close range. When the Second World War erupted, the U.S. Army quickly realized the urgent need for a personal automatic weapon capable of creating a dense wall of fire to counter the German blitzkrieg tactics. Initially, American troops were issued the M1918A2 version with the charging handle located on top and a finned barrel for cooling, an exquisite but costly and complex design for mass production. Recognizing that the pressures of total war demanded faster production rates, engineers simplified this design into the M1 and subsequently the M1A1 versions. They eliminated the complex Blischlock mechanism, moved the charging handle to the right side, removed the detachable stock, and replaced the intricate sights with a simple fixed aperture. Although appearing somewhat cruder than its peacetime predecessor, the M1A1 proved more reliable in the harsh conditions of the European theater. It fired the .45 ACP, a heavy pistol cartridge with immense stopping power. At ranges under 50 meters, a burst of .45 ACP from a Thompson could knock down any target instantly, regardless of how many layers of thick winter coats the enemy might be wearing. This was a massive psychological and physical advantage over the 9mm round used by the German MP40 submachine gun. However, this power came at a price. Weight. A fully loaded Thompson weighed nearly 11 pounds, comparable to, if not heavier than, the M1 Garand rifle. For soldiers marching dozens of miles a day, this weight was a genuine burden on their shoulders. Furthermore, its effective range was quite limited, only truly effective within 50 meters. Because of this characteristic, the Thompson was not standard issue for every soldier like the M1 Garand. It was typically reserved for squad leaders, scouts, and especially elite airborne units like the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions. For paratroopers, who were often dropped behind enemy lines and had to fight while surrounded, Thompson's ability to fire 600 to 700 rounds per minute was a talisman that helped them survive the initial chaotic hours after landing. An NCO from the 101st Airborne Division once recalled the sensation of jumping into Normandy on D-Day night, noting that the weight of the gun and ammunition almost tore his shoulder socket when the chute opened. But when he encountered a German patrol at just 10 meters in the darkness, he thanked God he hadn't traded it for anything else. Its deep, rhythmic thud was distinct from the high-pitched, tearing sound of German machine guns, becoming an auditory signal of American presence. Despite its great power, the Thompson also revealed economic disadvantages. Manufactured by machining from solid blocks of steel, the production cost of a Thompson at the beginning of the war was over $200, a colossal figure at the time, far more expensive than the stamped metal weapons of the enemy. Although the cost was later reduced due to industrial mass production processes, it remained a luxury weapon. Nevertheless, in brutal urban battles like those in the city of Aachen or the fight for Carrington, where combat took place room by room and stairwell by stairwell, the reliability and power of the Thompson proved worth every cent. American soldiers typically used 20 or 30-round stick magazines instead of the famous 50-round drum magazines seen in movies, as the drums were too heavy, difficult to load, and rattled when moving, fatal flaws in infantry combat. Ultimately, despite being heavy and expensive, the Thompson captured the hearts of American soldiers with its incredible durability. It could function well even when covered in mud or dust, provided it was properly lubricated. By the end of the war, although the U.S. Army had begun to introduce the cheaper and lighter M3 grease gun submachine gun as a replacement, veteran soldiers stubbornly held onto their Tommy guns. It was not just a weapon, but a symbol of overwhelming industrial might, ruggedness, and devastating close quarters capability. And speaking of combat at extremely close range, where even a submachine gun might become cumbersome, the American soldier had another trusted companion, a timeless legend that had served the military since before World War I, the M1918A2 pistol. In the brutal world of infantry warfare, there exists an unwritten rule that the pistol is often a weapon of desperation, a measure of last resort when all else has been exhausted or broken. However, for the United States military, the M1918A2 semi-automatic pistol held an entirely different status. It was not merely a sidearm, but a symbol of American mechanical prowess that endured through 2 world wars. Designed by the legendary John Browning and officially adopted by the military in 1911, its inception stemmed from bloody lessons learned during the Philippine insurrection of the early 20th century, where .38 caliber revolvers failed miserably to stop fanatical indigenous warriors. The U.S. Army realized they needed something more potent, a weapon capable of neutralizing an adversary instantly with a single shot. The answer was the .45 ACP cartridge, the heart of the M1911. Entering World War II, the improved M1918A1 version, featuring a more arched mainspring housing and a shorter trigger, became the inseparable companion of millions of officers, pilots, and especially tank crews. Technically, it was a simple yet brutally effective machine. Weighing approximately 2.4 pounds with a 7-round magazine, it was heavy and possessed a sharp recoil, demanding a steady wrist and skill from the operator. In return, however, its .45 ACP bullet carried massive kinetic energy at close range. An American soldier did not need to aim precisely for vital organs. A single hit to the torso delivered enough impact force to knock a German soldier off his feet, even if he was in the adrenaline-fueled heat of combat. It was this fearsome stopping power that forged the legend of the pistol that fit in one hand but hit like a cannon. The ideal combat environment for the M1918A1 was not the open field, but the cramped, stifling spaces where a rifle or submachine gun became cumbersome. This is why it was particularly favored by tank crews. An officer from the 2nd Armored Division, the unit nicknamed Hell on Wheels, once shared that within the confined, grease and gunpowder-filled turret of a Sherman tank, the M1918A2 was the only friend he trusted implicitly. If the tank was hit and caught fire, forcing the crew to bail out amidst enemy encirclement, the pistol strapped to his hip was his only ticket to survival. It was compact enough not to snag on equipment inside the vehicle, yet powerful enough to clear a bloody path to safety. The durability of the M1918A2 was also a factor that cemented its status as an icon. Browning's design allowed for certain loose tolerances in the moving parts, meaning the components were not as tightly fitted as those of a Swiss watch. While this might sound like a flaw, in the mud-soaked reality of the European battlefield, it was its greatest strength. Mud, sand, or ice struggled to jam this gun. Even if dropped in a puddle or buried in snow, a quick shake and a rack of the slide were usually all that was needed to bring it back to action. There were countless stories of American soldiers who, in moments of near death when their primary weapon ran dry, drew their 1911s and turned the tide. Nevertheless, its effective range of only 25 to 50 meters and limited ammunition capacity were undeniable weaknesses. It could not be used for long-range engagement, and reloading in the heat of battle required immense composure. Nearly 2 million M1918A2 pistols were produced throughout the war by various manufacturers, ranging from Colt and Remington Rand to the Singer Sewing Machine Company and Union Switch and Signal, a railway signaling firm. This demonstrated America's capability for total industrial mobilization. The pistol became part of the American soldier's identity, a symbol of ruggedness and raw power. However, the significant gap in range and firepower between the M1918 pistol and the M1 Garand rifle created a weaponry void for combat support personnel such as truck drivers, radio men, and mortarmen. They needed something lighter than the Garand, but with more reach than the 1911. That necessity led to the birth of a unique hybrid weapon, one that was produced in greater numbers than any other American small arm in the war: the M1 Carbine. If the M1 Garand was the heavy broadsword of the shock troops, the M1 Carbine was the ingenious solution to the logistics and mobility puzzle of the American military. In the early stages of the war, military planners identified a critical gap in their arsenal. Truck drivers, radio men, mortar crews, and junior officers could not lug around the heavy Garand all day while performing their specialized duties. Yet a standard M1911 pistol offered insufficient firepower to defend against enemy ambushes at medium ranges. They needed a hybrid weapon, as light as a pistol, but with the accuracy of a rifle. The result was the birth of the M1 Carbine, a weapon produced in record numbers of over 6 million units, surpassing even the M1 Garand, to become the most widely produced American infantry arm of World War II. Interestingly, this weapon stands as the clearest testament to the power of American civilian industry transforming for wartime needs. These guns were manufactured not only by traditional arms companies like Winchester, but also by makers of jukeboxes, typewriters, and automotive parts, such as General Motors Inland Division, IBM, and Underwood. Essentially, the M1 Carbine was a scaled-down semi-automatic rifle firing the .30 carbine cartridge, 7.62 30mm. This round was more powerful than a pistol bullet, but weaker than a standard rifle cartridge, creating a distinct firepower niche. Its greatest advantage was its weight. Weighing only about 5.3 pounds when loaded, it was half the weight of an M1 Garand. This allowed non-combatant soldiers to carry it on their backs all day without exhaustion, while still retaining effective combat capability up to 200 meters. In particular, the M1A1 variant, with a folding wire stock designed specifically for paratroopers, became a symbol of the airborne divisions during Operation Overlord. when jumping into the dark fields of France. The compactness of the M1A1 prevented paratroopers from getting tangled in suspension lines or tree branches, a vital factor during those perilous moments of landing. The 15-round magazine, and later 30-round, provided a respectable density of fire, giving soldiers far more confidence than merely carrying a pistol. However, the M1 Carbine was not a perfect weapon, and it received mixed reviews from the very soldiers who used it. The biggest issue lay in the stopping power of the bullet. In the bitter cold of the European winter of 1944, German soldiers often wore layers of thick wool coats. The .30 carbine round, with its round-nosed bullet, sometimes failed to penetrate effectively or cause enough damage to drop a target instantly unless hit in a vital area. A paratrooper from the 82nd Airborne Division once recounted that the gun was so light he sometimes forgot he was wearing it, a wonderful sense of freedom during long marches. Yet, during a firefight in Belgium, he had to fire 2 or 3 follow-up shots to bring down a charging German, a task the Garand would have accomplished with 1. Consequently, many frontline infantrymen preferred to accept the heavy burden of the Garand in exchange for its power, while the M1 Carbine was highly favored by scouts, engineers, and officers who wanted to camouflage themselves to avoid detection by German snipers. Since officers typically carried pistols, carrying a carbine helped them blend in with regular grunts. Despite its limitations in power, the immense role of the M1 Carbine in totally arming the U.S. military cannot be denied. It ensured that every soldier, from the cook to the truck driver, possessed effective fighting capability, turning every logistics unit into a force with high self-defense potential. It bridged the gap between pistol and rifle, creating a tactical flexibility that the German army could not replicate in time. But war is not just about personal duels or self-defense. To win squad-level engagements, the American army needed a weapon capable of suppression, a sledgehammer to pin the enemy down and silence German MG-42 machine gun nests. And that heavy responsibility fell upon the shoulders of the final legend on this list, the Browning automatic rifle, or BAR M1918A2. In the chaotic symphony of the European battlefield, if the M1 Garand held the main rhythm, the BAR M1918A2 was the deep, resonant drum that defined the intensity of the fight. This was the final and heaviest piece of the American infantry squad, a weapon born from World War I thinking, yet burdened with the responsibilities of modern warfare. Designed by the genius John Browning in 1917, the acronym BAR stood for Browning Automatic Rifle, a name that itself suggested the ambiguity of its classification. It was not quite a light machine gun like the British Bren or the German MG-42 due to its lack of a quick-change barrel and its limited 20-round magazine. Yet it was too heavy and powerful to be considered an assault rifle by modern standards. However, despite these definitional limitations, the BAR was the backbone of firepower for every American squad. U.S. military doctrine of the time revolved around fire and maneuver tactics, in which the bar gunner acted as a mobile base of fire. He would lay down suppressive fire, forcing the Germans to keep their heads down in their trenches, buying precious time for his M1 Garand-wielding comrades to flank and destroy the enemy. Structurally, the BAR A2 version used in World War II weighed nearly 20 pounds unloaded, a staggering figure for an individual weapon. It fired the potent .30-06 cartridge with 2 automatic firing modes, slow about 300 to 450 rounds per minute, and fast, about 500-650 rounds per minute. The slow fire mode was a feature highly favored by soldiers, as its distinctive slow thud-thud-thud helped the gunner control recoil better and conserve ammunition. However, the BAR's fatal weakness was its 20-round magazine. While the German MG-42 could spit out 1,200 rounds per minute from an endless belt, the BAR gunner frequently had to stop to reload after just a few seconds of squeezing the trigger. This placed them in mortal danger if not protected by squad mates. Furthermore, The fixed barrel meant the bar was prone to overheating if fired too aggressively, forcing the gunner to fire in disciplined bursts. Nevertheless, in the eyes of the infantrymen, the bar remained a guardian angel. Its immense weight helped absorb recoil, making it an incredibly accurate weapon at long range. The penetrating power of the .30 Aero-6 round from the bar's long barrel was sufficient to punch through thick brick walls, large tree trunks, or sandbags, neutralizing German snipers hiding behind cover. An infantryman from the 4th Division once shared a touching truth about the camaraderie surrounding this gun. He said that everyone in the squad, from scouts to fresh replacements, volunteered to carry extra ammunition for the bar gunner, even though their own rucksacks were already heavy. They did so not out of orders, but because they understood that when the deep roar of the bar rang out, the lives of the entire squad were best protected. The Germans might dismiss rifles, but they always feared and concentrated their fire to eliminate the bar gunner first. Consequently, the man carrying the bar was often the strongest, bravest, and also the most high-value target on the battlefield. Looking back at the entire picture of the American infantry arsenal in Europe, from the reliable M1 Garand, the powerful Thompson, the durable 1911 pistol, the mobile M1 Carbine to the tank-like bar, we see the might of the arsenal of democracy. These 5 weapons, each with its own look and role, shared common characteristics reflecting the American mindset: mass production, ease of repair, powerful firepower, and high reliability. They might not have been as exquisite or artistic as the finely machined German arms, but they were pragmatic tools of war, built to function in mud, snow, and dust. Most importantly, they were placed in the hands of ordinary citizens, bakers, teachers, farmers in uniform, and helped them defeat the most professional war machine in the world at that time. Today, these guns rest quietly in museums or collectors' display cases, their cold steel no longer smelling of gunpowder. But behind every scratch on the wooden stock, every wear mark on the barrel, lies a story of courage, sacrifice, and the resilient will of a generation that fought to liberate Europe. They are not merely inanimate objects, but historical witnesses, reminding us of the price of freedom and the power of human beings when equipped with the right tools to defend their ideals. Thank you for accompanying our channel on this journey of exploring military history. If you found this video informative, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts on which weapon impressed you the most in the comments below. Your support is the motivation for us to continue reconstructing heroic pages of history in future videos.